Really nice. Also, when I have conversations about what's happening, a lot of people take one change into the equation and believe everything else will stay the same. For example, how many
Right, exactly.
things will share the same road, right? Now we
Mhm.
have cars sharing the same road with autonomous cars. And then we have humans
Yeah.
sharing the same pedestrian path with robots, delivery bots, and things that are going to make pedestrian busy. How thing is this going to be rearranged? That's how are the
Mhm.
parameters changing on that same physical space that we're sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we, and this is maybe where being a historian has some advantages, but most people aren't aware that, cities didn't have sidewalks until the end of, to the mid 18th century, really. And all of the culture around the sidewalk, which was codified in the 19th century and beyond, and then recodified in the 20th century, it's a work in progress. And there's constant renegotiation of those kinds of public spaces that's going on. And I firmly believe we're at a really crucial decision point with respect to the design of cities right now. And the environmental catastrophe that we're just beginning to confront, but not fully confronting, really will impose on us some of these solutions. But there's also quality of life issues that are going to drive those choices. And I think we're at a real crossroads, literally, around these these issues. And I think exactly as you suggest, a redistribution, reallocation of public space is really what's at stake ultimately, restructuring.
Do you have a personal vision on that?
Of what that should be.
Yes.
uh, I do. I think that I'm very sympathetic to the kind of arguments, polemics that have been put forward in places like Barcelona and Paris, focused on the superblock concept of basically re-aggregating urban zones to create pedestrian islands, reducing the footprint of automobiles. And I think the 15-minute city idea, which Carlos Moreno has been pushing through the Paris mayor's office, those are very strong concepts, and I see them as well aligned with what's been going on for the last 20, 30 years in some of the most advanced cities in the world, many of them in Northern Europe. So absolutely. There are many challenges associated with those visions, but I think they're very strong and compelling visions.
I agree. I would like to open the floor to everyone. Any of you questions, thoughts?
Yeah, may I?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Sarge put his hand up first.
Sarge, you go first, and then
I
Marcus.
raised it first. That's right, Marcus. Jeffrey, you're talking about autonomous, and then I thought, how many things do we bring in our life that make us less autonomous? In other words, that leash us, that tether us, right? And so maybe the goal is to actually make people more autonomous, right? So
Yeah.
if your little robot, so you said if it relied on GPS, that's a tether that required, right? That has limitations where it can go and not go. And whereas you said, we'll just do optical. So you can go in a cave, you can, and it really got me thinking about, we have to make people more autonomous, not less.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And you've intuited our company motto, which is autonomy for humans. so you nailed it right on the head. Yeah, exactly. I think so many connected devices tether us rather than freeing us. And so to have a device that can leverage the power of networks, but is not reliant upon the power of networks for everything that it does, that has a local intelligence, I think gives us a very different way of engaging with the whole world of the Internet of Things. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Marcus.
Yeah, it just seems to me that what you're talking about is to augment the human rather than replace them. Instead of having a GPS which is confining the human to being basically a slave to the device, I mean, it's effectively as you and Sarge have just been saying. I'm intrigued, as you were debating this internally before you determined this was the solution which you're going to promote initially, what other things had you contemplated?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So we did look at all kinds of ideas of even higher level autonomy, level 4, level 5, particularly in relation to delivery. Like at the moment that the company was founded, there was a lot of conversation going on around the sort of last mile solution for the delivery economy. When we looked at the tech, we were just, and I continue to be unpersuaded that there are technical solutions to the level of complexity involved in those environments. I believe that it's possible that level 5 autonomous delivery robots can operate on campuses, on well-mapped areas, in their own lanes, in controlled spaces. But city centers are never going to be those environments. They're only in a very limited way. And so we gradually shifted our focus and became more and more interested in walking, and in the notion that walking is the one foundational practice in the mobility sector that hasn't been innovated in significant ways. And so yeah, there was a significant period of time when we looked at more autonomous rather than, sort of less autonomous or more, I think as you put it well, a design solution that would be less focused on the augmentation of a human behavior rather than maybe allowing for some substitution alongside augmentation. And we're not excluding moving in that direction as we add increasingly complex autonomous behaviors to our robots. It's just that we thought it was important to start with an augmentation that provides a direct and immediate benefit to people, not only people who are able-bodied, but also people who struggle with mobility questions. The aging population, the fastest growing sector of the population in the advanced industrial economies, the disabled, the whole sort of portion of the population, which is surprisingly large, that struggles with mobility issues in some form or another. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, I think you have. Really good, thank you.
Jeffrey, first of all, fantastic idea and really exciting, this future you drafted. I would have a bit of a more technical question. How do you perform the tracking? So you said it's completely visual based. Do you have like cameras on the device, or is it a
Yes.
lidar, or what kind of sensors do you use to make sure that you track the person? Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Johan, we use an array of cameras. There are actually 4 cameras, 3 RGB cameras, just ordinary, very inexpensive RGB cameras. I mean, they cost less than $1, just to give you a sense. And we use a RealSense depth sensing camera. It's an Intel camera together. So in the front of the vehicle, there is basically a camera array, which the software basically works with to integrate depth sensing combined with scanning of the visual field. And in order to walk with the vehicle, what you have is, there is an app which is used for verifying that you're an authorized user, essentially. So when you first come up to the vehicle, let's say it's your Gita. Gita is the name of the robot. It means a pleasure trip in Italian, like a short trip. You will simply walk up. If you're an authorized user, you'll already be logged in. Basically, you'll just touch a button on the vehicle and it will wake up and come from park up into self-balancing. It doesn't use a gyroscope. It uses basically the torque on the wheels to self-balance. And all you have to do is hit the button again, and the rest you know how to do. You just walk. So what the vehicle does at that moment is it's not using facial recognition. It's not using video. It doesn't keep any video. It uses all of the cameras for real-time optical navigation purposes. It's built a bounding box around your body, and it's locked onto that bounding box as the point of reference in all of the behaviors. So even if it moves out of following you to avoid an obstacle, or it heals, or it does a number of the smart things that it does as you move around the world, all of those are basically just triggered by locking onto the geometry of your body. So it can lock onto a wheelchair. Like, it doesn't care if you're a standing human, or you're on crutches, or you're in a wheelchair, or you're 8 years old, or 60 years old, and all of the the behaviors, as I suggested, again, are adaptive and responsive behaviors that are using that bounding box, that geometry of the operator's body, as a point of reference. So if you speed up, the robot will follow at a greater distance. If you slow down, it'll get closer to you. If you stop, it will stop, and at a certain point, it will park itself. If you were to stop and talk to a friend for 5 minutes. And we're working on much more complex behaviors as well, that involve parking and other kinds of autonomous actions that, again, allow you not to focus on what the robot is doing, because the robot knows how to behave, but rather to focus on what you're doing. So that's our key, kind of key design objective. I should mention also, there are other infrared and other sensors that allow the vehicle to recognize a cliff, to avoid, going off an edge of a surface, that look to the side and behind. So no LiDAR. We found that LiDAR was too expensive. We couldn't get the vehicle down, to a couple $1,000s. We tried LiDAR. It works great in some circumstances. It has other challenges. We're on the the Elon Musk side of the LiDAR versus optical navigation battle, and that's where we stand.
Oracle. May I add to this question, please? I would be curious if you could say 1 or 2 words on the electrical architecture of that robot. So on which CPUs, or how many CPUs are these algorithms executed?
So we have a small onboard computer, and the operating system is a closed source proprietary operating system that we've developed, but that of course can be updated over the air. So we're able to constantly add behaviors, perfect behaviors, alter features of the robot's core operations. And perhaps eventually we might open up a part of the operating system to allow people to customize or personalize the robots in ways that could be interesting, especially for business-to-business applications like fleet-type applications. Unfortunately, for IP reasons, I can't really go into the details of the exact structure of the boards, but suffice it to know, there's the kind of brains of the vehicle is really a kind of master circuit board that integrates the optical system, the camera arrays, the other sensors that are on the periphery of the vehicle, and that can run directly off of the battery without being online. So we do not require being on a Wi-Fi network to operate the system, which is of course important, because we want the vehicle to, this comes back to a point that was made earlier, we're not network dependent, we're not GPS dependent. You can really take, I'm up here in the countryside, I've taken Jitas out for walks in the woods, it doesn't, the robot does not require any of that infrastructure to operate just as efficiently as it does on the sidewalk of a major city.
Jeffrey, is there any kind of communication between the robots? So if my Jita meets another person's, is there some peer-to-peer exchange, or is it like, with drones, we have these drone swarms that they can do a task together, or I don't know, imagine my Jita, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, at this point, we haven't fully developed what I think would go in the direction of your question, which would be to think of them in a more sort of social or swarm-like context. But what we have done is, and this is of interest to people in the business sector in particular, it's very easy to have the robot follow another robot. So you can move them around the way you would move a platoon, like a mother duck, followed by the ducklings. Just as a robot can follow a person, it can follow another. A Jita can follow a Jita, can follow a Jita. There would be the potential for more complex behaviors that involve that kind of social dimension or sort of fleet dimension. And we really haven't had a chance to develop any of those as of yet. We're really focused right now on trying to build the consumer market for these vehicles, and that's challenging enough for us right now. So I don't know if we're going to get to some of the more interesting, playful ideas about what a world would look like where fleets are operating together.
I have one more question, Jeffrey. We have Android and we have iOS. Will there be something like a robot OS that also opens up for apps and people will be part of the developing process?
It's a great question. And for the moment, we have our hands full just really focusing on building a market. But, and as I said, our operating system, originally, we started out actually with working with open source tools, but we realized that none of them were, ROS was the main robotic open source. Yeah. So, I mean, we worked with ROS, but ROS didn't get us where we needed to be. It doesn't have the kind of refinement that we're seeking. For us, user experience is everything. It's got to be magical. It's got to be seamless. It's got to be intuitive. ROS is fine for laboratory experiments. It's fine for all kinds of things. So in coming to your question, Nikki, I think at some future time, it would be very interesting to open up, and certainly it's something we've thought about, parts of our operating system for customization, personalization, maybe apps that piggyback on, that add value to these kinds of vehicles. But honestly, we're not quite there yet, and that's something that we'll have to see whether there's enough of a market for them to allow the creation of a whole a kind of ecosystem around them via apps and other forms of, and not just apps, by the way, physical structures that we have a partnership, for example, with Penguin coolers, with a custom built cooler that fits right into the cargo bay. And the robots have a USB port that would allow you to connect to the power, to the battery, which has an autonomy of about 5 hours of continuous operation. So it's really more like 8 hours of regular operation, but also to the connectivity gateway. So there's the potential for a whole ecosystem of physical devices also that piggyback on, that connect to a mobile robot like Jita. That's, but that's still a little bit in our future rather than in the present.
I don't know when everything is going to be choreographed with drones and stuff.
Yeah, and why not? I mean, you could plug in all kinds of devices, including other sort of smart devices that might be, have a shared mission with the Jita. Like, one of the experiments that we did early on was asking journalists who do field reporting if they were interested in putting 360 high-resolution cameras on the top of a Jita instead of having a film crew, and going out into physical places and broadcasting live off of the connectivity gateway. Like that's a really interesting, it's not a mass application, but it's the kind of application that a very light kind of follow me robotic vehicle like this allows for.
Great. Any more questions? Sarge, go ahead.
Jeffrey, I have a question about the business model. So, like you get a great device, but also what the device learns from me gets monetized. So is that part of your business model in terms of what you can gather and all that? I mean, is that built into one way to bring in revenue based on what the device learns about the person or the city, etc.?
So we haven't gone that direction, Sarge, if only for one simple reason, and that is that we felt, because of our focus on the consumer market, that we needed to create a device that raised absolutely no questions, no anxieties on the part of consumers, that their data was somehow being mined or that their movements were being tracked. You know, many of these are things, of course, that our phones do all the time, and many people, you know, don't get all worked up about or worried about them. But given the fact that we're talking about a vehicle that has a lot of sensing capabilities, you know, 3 RGB cameras, a depth sensing camera, we wanted it to be a vehicle that inspires an extremely high degree of trust. We think that if we're able to create a B2B market, we might want to go more in the direction of capturing data, of perfecting, maybe even using some machine learning or other techniques to study the way people actually use the vehicles, to perfect some of the behaviors. But we felt that we shouldn't start there, that we should get there once there's a level of trust, security around the vehicles themselves.
I mean, there's the personal data, but undoubtedly there's the aggregate data, right? If how many robots walk down the street, right? Be like, oh, this trash can, this is what I mean. So that could be.
Yeah, well, so a lot of that data would already be present through people's phones, obviously. So if they're logged in, you know, they have the app, you know, we do keep odometry. People want to know how long they've walked. Like some of that is available to us. And we do keep performance data from the vehicles, of course, for obvious, you know, maintenance and warranty reasons. So some of that's there, but we could definitely enrich the kind of data we capture to, and that could become an interesting piece of the business model, but it's not where we started. In part, that's because we started also trying to respect the values of our parent company, which is a company that sells vehicles to, you know, to consumers largely. I'm afraid I'm probably going to have to run, folks. I have an 11 o'clock call, but I've enjoyed the conversation and happy to follow it up in email or in a future call.
Jeffrey, thank you so much. Evelyn, thank you again for the connection. Jeffrey, thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Cheers.
Bye.